Jack stood at the entrance of the greatest palace he had ever seen. The walls were made of something that looked like glass but shimmered with colors that did not exist on Earth. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually floated inside the building. Everything around him was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. It was working. Jack was not supposed to be here. He was a commander in the Earth Defense Fleet, a pilot who had spent most of his career flying cargo ships and occasionally shooting at pirates. He was not a diplomat. He did not know how to bow properly or which fork to use at fancy dinners. But every real ambassador had refused this mission, and somehow Jack's name had ended up on the list of replacements. "You are the human representative?" asked a tall alien who appeared beside him. The alien's skin was silver, like polished metal, and his eyes glowed with soft white light. He looked at Jack the way someone might look at a bug that had crawled onto their dinner plate. "That's me," Jack said. He tried to smile in a friendly way. "Commander Jack, thanks for having me." The alien did not respond to his thanks. "I am Minister. I will show you to your quarters. You will stay there until you are called. Do not wander. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to anyone unless they speak to you first." "Sounds fun," Jack muttered. The Empire was 300 years old and controlled more than 300 star systems. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. To them, humanity was a young and foolish species that had somehow stumbled into space travel. Most believed humans should be watched carefully, like dangerous animals that might bite at any moment. Jack followed Minister through endless hallways. Others passed them, and every single one stopped to stare at Jack. Some whispered to each other. A few made expressions that Jack was pretty sure meant disgust. He kept his eyes forward and tried not to let it bother him. His quarters were nice, at least. The room was bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. The bed looked comfortable, and there was a window that showed a view of 3 moons hanging in a purple sky. Jack sat down on the bed and let out a long breath. He was supposed to secure a trade agreement. Humanity needed access to technology, especially their medical equipment. A single healing device could cure diseases that killed millions of humans every year, but they had no interest in sharing. They saw no benefit in helping a species they considered inferior. Jack's job was to change their minds. He had about as much chance of success as a snowball in a furnace. Over the next few days, Jack attended meetings where ministers talked about him as if he was not in the room. They discussed whether humans were intelligent enough to be trusted with advanced technology. They debated whether humanity would use medicine or somehow turn it into weapons. One minister suggested that helping humans would be like giving matches to children. Jack sat quietly through all of it. He smiled when appropriate. He answered questions politely. He did not punch anyone, even though he really wanted to. On the 5th night, he could not sleep. The palace was too quiet and too strange, and he kept thinking about all the people back on Earth who were counting on him to succeed. He decided to take a walk, even though he had been told not to wander. The hallways were empty at this hour. Jack walked slowly, looking at the strange artwork on the walls. They liked to paint pictures of their history. Most of the paintings showed battles and conquests. Humans were nowhere to be seen, of course. They had not been important enough to include. He turned a corner and stopped. Someone was watching him. She stood behind a tall pillar made of crystal, and at first Jack could only see part of her face. Silver skin, like all, but her eyes were different. Instead of the cold, distant look he had seen on every other face, her eyes held something that looked almost like curiosity. Jack smiled at her. It was automatic, the way he would smile at anyone he met. She did not smile back. She simply stared at him, her head tilted slightly to one side, as if she was trying to figure out what kind of creature he was. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Jack stood there for a long moment, wondering what had just happened. He learned her name the next day, Aura, third daughter of Emperor the Eternal. She was a princess, which meant she was about as far above Jack's status as the stars were above the ground. The briefing files said she was considered unusual by standards. She asked too many questions. She was too interested in alien cultures. Her own people thought she was strange. Jack found himself watching for her at the official events he was forced to attend. Sometimes he spotted her at the edge of a crowd, always observing, never participating. And sometimes, when he looked in her direction, he caught her looking back at him. It was probably nothing. She was probably just curious about the strange human who had invaded her home. But something about the way she looked at him made Jack feel like she was seeing something that no one else could see. 2 weeks into his mission, Jack received bad news. The Emperor had decided not to grant him a formal audience. Without meeting the Emperor, there could be no trade agreement. Jack's mission was effectively over before it had really begun. He sat in his quarters that night, staring out the window at the 3 moons, trying to figure out what to do next. Going home empty-handed meant failing everyone who had believed in him, but staying here seemed pointless. A soft knock came at his door. Jack opened it and found himself face to face with Aura. She was even more striking up close. Her silver skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and her eyes were the color of starlight. She was tall, taller than him, and she held herself with the perfect posture of someone who had been raised in a palace. "You should not be here," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "And neither should I, but I have questions, and I think you might be the only one who can answer them." Jack stepped aside and let her in. That was the moment everything changed, though he did not know it yet. That was the moment when a simple mission became something much more complicated and much more dangerous. That was the moment when Jack stopped being just an unwelcome ambassador and started becoming something else entirely. Something that would shake the foundations of an empire, sat on the edge of a chair, keeping as much distance from Jack as the small room allowed. Did not like to be close to others. Physical contact was rare among them, reserved only for the most intimate moments. The idea of touching a stranger was unthinkable. "Why do humans smile so much?" she asked. It was the first of many questions she would ask that night. Jack shrugged. "I guess we just do. It makes people feel comfortable. It shows we are friendly." "Do not smile," said. "It is considered a sign of weakness. Showing your teeth is what animals do." "Well, I am kind of an animal," Jack said with a grin. "At least, that is what your ministers seem to think." Something flickered across face. It was not quite a smile, but it was not the cold expression Jack had seen on other either. It was something new, something curious. They talked until the first sun began to rise. Wanted to know everything about Earth. She asked about the oceans, which seemed to fascinate her because had very little water. She asked about human families, about how parents raised their children with hugs and kisses instead of formal instruction. She asked about music and was amazed to learn that humans sang for no practical reason, just because it felt good. Jack answered every question honestly. He did not try to make humanity sound better than it was. He told her about wars and pollution and all the terrible things humans had done to each other throughout history. But he also told her about kindness, about strangers helping strangers, about people risking their lives to save others they had never met. "Why would someone die for a stranger?" asked. She seemed genuinely confused. "Because it is the right thing to do," Jack said. "Because we believe every life has value, even the life of someone we do not know." Was quiet for a long time after that. Their secret meetings became a regular thing. Every few nights when the palace was asleep would come to Jack's quarters. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes she brought him strange foods to try. Sometimes she simply sat in silence, watching him as if he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Jack found himself looking forward to these visits more than anything else. The days were still difficult. He still had to sit through meetings where he was ignored or insulted. He still had to smile politely while aliens talked about humans like they were disease carriers. But knowing that would come to him at night made everything easier to bear. "You should not trust me," she told him one evening. They were sitting in a small garden hidden deep within the palace, surrounded by flowers that glowed in the darkness. "I am a princess of the empire. My loyalty is supposed to be to my people." "Is it?" Jack asked. Did not answer right away. She looked up at the 3 moons hanging in the sky, her silver face painted with their pale light. "I do not know any more. I have spent my whole life being told that are superior to all other species, that we are more intelligent, more civilized, more worthy of existence. But talking to you, I am starting to wonder if that is true." "We are not better than you," Jack said. "We are just different." Different repeated as if tasting the word. Yes, different, but perhaps different is not the same as inferior. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Jack felt something pass between them. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. A connection that crossed the vast emptiness between their species and touched something deeper. Began to teach him about the court. She told him which ministers could be trusted and which ones wanted humanity destroyed. She explained the complex web of alliances and rivalries that controlled politics. She warned him about her brother, Crown Prince, who believed that humans were a disease that needed to be eliminated before they could spread. "Hates your kind," she said. "He sees humanity as a threat to everything we have built. He has been pushing Father to deny your trade agreement and to close our borders to all human ships." "What about you?" Jack asked. "What do you want?" Was silent for a moment. "I want to understand. I want to know if everything I have been taught is wrong. I want to know if there is more to the universe than conquest and power and keeping ourselves separate from everything that is different." She reached out then and did something that made Jack's heart stop. She touched his hand. Her silver fingers brushed against his skin, light as a feather, there and gone in an instant. But it meant something. Among such contact was almost unheard of. "You are the first person who has ever made me feel like I might not be alone," she whispered. Jack did not know what to say. He was just a pilot from Earth, a nobody who had stumbled into a princess's life by accident. He had nothing to offer her. He could not protect her from her own people. He could not give her the answers she was looking for. But he could be there. He could listen. He could be her friend in a world that had never given her one. "You are not alone," he said finally. "As long as I am here, you will never be alone." It was a promise he meant with every part of himself. And it was a promise that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. The weeks passed, and their bond grew stronger. Jack stopped thinking of as an alien princess and started thinking of her as simply. She was funny in a quiet way, making observations that surprised him with their sharpness. She was brave, risking her reputation every time she came to see him. And she was lonely in a way that broke his heart, trapped in a palace full of people who did not understand her. For her part, began to see Jack as something impossible, a human who was neither the savage her people feared nor the inferior creature they dismissed. He was kind without expecting anything in return. He laughed at himself, which no would ever do. He treated her like a person instead of a princess. Neither of them talked about what would happen when Jack's mission ended. Neither of them wanted to think about the day he would have to leave and return to Earth. But that day was coming, whether they wanted it to or not. And before it arrived, something much worse would happen. Something that would force them both to discover just how much they were willing to sacrifice for each other. The danger was already moving toward them, hidden in the shadows of the palace, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The attack came on a night like any other. Jack was walking back to his quarters after another pointless meeting with a minor trade official. The hallway was empty, lit only by the soft glow of crystals set into the walls. He was thinking about, wondering if she would visit him tonight, when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned just in time to see 3 figures emerging from the shadows. They were not, Jack could tell immediately by the way they moved, were graceful, almost floating when they walked. These creatures moved like predators, fast and violent. Their bodies were covered in dark scales, and their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. Mercenaries, professional killers hired to do someone else's dirty work. The first one reached Jack before he could react. A blade flashed in the dim light, and Jack felt a line of fire across his arm. He stumbled backward, reaching for the small knife he kept hidden in his boot. It was a pitiful weapon compared to what these assassins carried, but it was all he had. The second attacker came at him from the side. Jack ducked under the swing and drove his knife into the creature's throat. Violet blood sprayed across his face as the mercenary fell. The third one hesitated, surprised that a human could fight back. That hesitation cost him his life. Jack grabbed the fallen assassin's blade and threw it in one smooth motion. The weapon buried itself in the third attacker's chest. But the first one was still standing. Jack tried to turn, but he was too slow. Pain exploded in his shoulder as a blade punched through flesh and muscle. He screamed and fell to his knees, his vision going white around the edges. The assassin stood over him, raising his weapon for the killing blow. Then the hallway lit up with the flash of an energy weapon. The assassin crumpled to the ground, smoke rising from a hole in his back. Jack looked up through pain-blurred eyes and saw standing at the end of the hallway. She was holding a weapon that looked too big for her hands, and her silver face was twisted with an expression he had never seen before. Fear, she was afraid, not for herself but for him. She ran to his side and dropped to her knees. Her hands pressed against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Did not touch, kept their distance, but pressed her palms against his torn flesh as if nothing else in the universe mattered. "Do not die," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "Please do not die." "I am not planning on it," Jack managed to say. The words came out weak and rough. Palace guards arrived moments later. They found a scene that confused them greatly. A human ambassador lying in a pool of blood, 3 dead mercenaries, and a princess of the empire with her hands covered in red human blood, tears streaming down her silver face. Tears, did not cry. It was considered the ultimate loss of control, the most shameful display of emotion possible, but wept openly as the guards carried Jack away, and she did not seem to care who saw. Jack spent 3 days in a medical facility, healing under the care of doctors who seemed annoyed that they had to waste their advanced technology on a human. Visited whenever she could, sitting beside his bed in silence, watching him breathe. "You saved my life," Jack said on the second day. "You would have done the same for me," she replied simply. It was true. Jack knew it in his bones. He would die for this strange silver princess who had somehow become the most important person in his life. When he was strong enough to sit up, told him what she had learned. The assassination attempt had not been random. Someone in the palace had paid those mercenaries to kill him. Someone who wanted to start a war between humanity and the Empire. "If you had died," explained, "your people would have demanded answers. They might have attacked us, and my people would have used that attack as an excuse to wipe out humanity once and for all." "Who would want that?" Jack asked, though he already suspected the answer. "My brother," his voice was flat, empty of emotion, "has been building support among the older families. They believe humanity is dangerous. They want to destroy your species before you can become a real threat." Jack closed his eyes. He had known that some hated humans, but hearing that a prince of the empire was willing to commit murder to start a war made it terribly real. "There is more," continued. "Is not acting alone. He has allies throughout the court. Ministers, generals, even members of the Imperial Guard. They call themselves the Purists. They believe the Empire should remain closed to all outside species forever." "What about your father? Does the Emperor know?" Shook her head. "Father is old and tired. He trusts his advisors to tell him the truth, but many of those advisors belong to faction. They feed him lies and keep him ignorant of what is really happening. Jack reached out and took her hand. It was a human gesture, one that would have meant nothing on Earth. But here, between them, it meant everything. "What do we do?" he asked. "I do not know," admitted. "If I accuse my brother publicly, no one will believe me. He is the crown prince. I am just the strange princess who asks too many questions. My word means nothing against his." "Then we need proof." "Proof that does not exist. Is careful, he never leaves evidence behind." Jack was silent for a long moment. His shoulder ached and his body was exhausted, but his mind was racing. There had to be a way. There was always a way. "Then we make him show his hand," Jack said finally. "We force him to act in public, where everyone can see what he really is." Looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. "How?" "I do not know yet. But I am not leaving this palace until your brother is exposed and your people know the truth. And I am not leaving you to face this alone." She squeezed his hand then, her silver fingers intertwined with his human ones. "You are either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Jack said with a weak smile. Outside the medical facility, the palace continued its ancient routines. Ministers plotted and courtiers gossiped. Prince smiled his cold smile and waited for his next opportunity. He did not know it yet, but his plans were about to face something he had never expected, something he had dismissed as impossible. A human who refused to give up, and a princess who had finally found something worth fighting for. The Festival of Eternal Light was the most important ceremony in the calendar. Once every 10 years, the entire imperial court gathered in the grand throne room to celebrate the founding of the empire. Every noble family attended. Every minister and general stood in their assigned places. The emperor himself sat upon the crystal throne, ancient and silent, watching his people bow before him. Jack was allowed to attend only because refusing him would have been a diplomatic insult. He stood at the very back of the massive room, surrounded by guards who watched his every move. From his position, he could barely see the throne at the far end of the hall. But he could see. She stood with her siblings near the front, dressed in robes of silver and white. Even from this distance, Jack could tell she was nervous. Her posture was too stiff, her movements too careful. Something was wrong. The ceremony began with prayers to the ancient gods of. Ministers chanted words in a language Jack did not understand. Incense burned, filling the air with sweet smoke. The emperor raised his hand in blessing, and the entire court bowed as one. Then Crown Prince stepped forward. Jack had seen before, but only from a distance. Up close, the prince was impressive. He was tall even by standards, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. His eyes were cold and calculating, the eyes of someone who saw other people as obstacles to be removed. "Father," said, his voice carrying through the silent hall, "I come before you with a heavy heart. I have discovered a traitor in our midst." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The emperor leaned forward on his throne, his ancient face creased with concern. "A traitor," the emperor repeated. "Who would dare betray the empire during our most sacred festival?" Turned and pointed directly at. "My sister," he said, "Princess Aura." The murmurs became gasps. Jack felt his blood turn cold. He tried to push forward, but the guards blocked his path with crossed spears. Stood frozen in place as continued his accusation. He claimed she had been meeting secretly with the human ambassador. He presented recordings that showed her entering Jack's quarters late at night. He produced testimony from servants who had seen them talking in hidden gardens. "She has been corrupted by human influence," declared. "She has betrayed her blood, her family, and her empire. She has shared imperial secrets with an alien species that seeks to destroy us." It was all lies, twisted versions of the truth designed to paint as a traitor. The recordings were real, but the context was false. The testimony was bought with bribes and threats. Jack wanted to scream that it was all wrong, but his voice would mean nothing here. Did not defend herself. She stood straight and proud, her silver eyes fixed on her brother, did not beg, did not show weakness. She would face her fate with dignity, even if that fate was death. Under the ancient laws, continued, the punishment for treason is execution. I ask that justice be served. The emperor sat motionless on his throne. His face showed no emotion, but Jack could see the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was his daughter, his own child, but the evidence seemed overwhelming and the court was watching. If he showed mercy, it would look like he was placing family above duty. "Does anyone speak in defense of Princess?" the emperor asked. His voice was tired, almost pleading. Silence. No one moved, no one breathed. The nobles kept their eyes on the ground, afraid to involve themselves. Other siblings stood like statues, unwilling to risk their own positions. And then a voice rang out from the back of the hall. "I do." Every head turned. Jack pushed past the guards, ignoring their attempts to stop him. He walked down the central aisle of the throne room, his boots echoing on the marble floor. Thousands of alien eyes followed him, watching this small human dare to interrupt their sacred ceremony. He stopped in front of the throne and looked up at the emperor. "The princess is innocent," Jack said. "She came to me because she wanted to understand humanity. She asked questions. That is all she did. She shared no secrets. She betrayed no one. The only crime she committed was treating a human like a person instead of an animal." Laughed. It was a cold sound like ice cracking. "You would defend her, a human defending a princess. This only proves how deeply she has been corrupted." "I am not finished," Jack said. He turned to face the crowd, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "I invoke the right of challenge." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Smile faltered. The right of challenge was an ancient tradition. When someone was accused of a crime, another person could challenge the accuser to combat. If the challenger won, the accused was declared innocent. If the challenger lost, both the challenger and the accused would be executed. No one had invoked the right of challenge in centuries. It was considered barbaric, a relic of a more primitive age. But it was still law. It was still binding. "You cannot be serious," said. "You are a human. You would fight a warrior." "I would fight anyone for her," Jack replied. He looked at them. Her silver eyes were wide with shock and something else, something that looked like hope mixed with terror. The emperor raised his hand for silence. The court held its breath. "The right of challenge has been invoked," the emperor said slowly. "Under the ancient laws, it cannot be refused. Prince, do you accept the human's challenge?" Smile returned, sharper than before. "Of course. It will be my pleasure to demonstrate the difference between strength and human weakness." "Then let it be done," the emperor declared. "The challenge will take place here now before the eyes of the empire. May the truth reveal itself through combat." Servants rushed to clear a space in the center of the throne room. Weapons were brought forward. Jack was given a choice and selected a simple sword, the kind he had trained with back on Earth. Chose an elegant blade with a curved edge, a weapon designed for killing. They faced each other in the center of the hall, looked confident, almost amused. Jack looked calm, his face showing nothing. "Any last words, human?" asked. Jack adjusted his grip on the sword. His shoulder still ached from the assassin's blade. He was tired and hurt, and facing an opponent who was stronger and faster than him in every way. But he was not afraid. "Just one," he said. "I do not lose." The emperor raised his hand. And the fight began, attacked first. He moved like lightning, his blade cutting through the air faster than any human could follow. Jack barely managed to block the first strike. The impact sent shockwaves through his arms, nearly knocking the sword from his hands. He stumbled backward and pressed forward, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction. "Too slow," the prince hissed. Too weak, you should have stayed on your primitive planet." Jack did not waste breath on words. He focused on staying alive, blocking and dodging, trying to find some pattern in its attacks. That was faster and stronger, but he was also arrogant. He expected the fight to end quickly. He was not prepared for a long battle. The first minute felt like an hour. Cut Jack twice, shallow wounds on his arm and side. Red human blood dripped onto the marble floor, and the watching crowd murmured with each drop. They had never seen a human bleed before. Some of them seemed disgusted. Others looked fascinated. Jack kept moving. He let push him around the combat circle, giving ground whenever the prince attacked. To the audience, it looked like he was losing badly. But Jack was watching, learning, waiting for his moment. Were stronger than humans. Their bodies were built for short bursts of incredible power, but humans were designed for endurance. On Earth, the ancestors of humanity had hunted by chasing their prey for hours, waiting for animals to collapse from exhaustion. It was called persistence hunting. Most species could run faster than humans, but nothing could run longer. Jack was betting his life on that ancient advantage. By the third minute, his attacks began to slow, not by much, but enough for Jack to notice. The prince was breathing harder now. His perfect form was starting to slip. He had expected to kill this weak human in seconds, and the fact that Jack was still standing confused and frustrated him. "Why will you not die?" snarled. He launched another flurry of strikes, each one meant to be fatal. Jack blocked, dodged, and retreated, taking small cuts but nothing serious. "You should be dead by now. You should be bleeding out on this floor." "Sorry to disappoint you," Jack said. He was hurting everywhere. His shoulder screamed with pain, his lungs burned, but he was still standing, he was still fighting. And he was not alone. He could feel watching him. He could feel her hope, her fear, her desperate wish for him to survive. That feeling gave him strength when his body had none left to give. He was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for her, for the future they might have together if he could just survive the next few minutes. Made his mistake in the 5th minute. The prince was tired and angry, two things that did not mix well with combat. He overextended on a thrust, putting too much of his weight forward. Jack had been waiting for exactly this moment. He thrust and brought his sword around in a single clean motion. The blade bit into his leg, cutting through muscle and tendon. The prince screamed and fell to one knee, his weapon clattering to the floor. The throne room went silent. Jack stood over the fallen prince, his sword resting against his throat. Both of them were covered in blood, red and violet mixing together on the marble floor. Jack's entire body was shaking with exhaustion, but his hand was steady. "Yield," he said quietly. Looked up at him with pure hatred in his eyes. "You cannot kill me. I am the crown prince. My father will never allow it." "I do not want to kill you," Jack said. "I want you to admit the truth. Tell everyone here that you lied about your sister. Tell them about the mercenaries you hired to kill me. Tell them about your plans to start a war." "Never." Jack pressed the blade harder against his throat. A thin line of violet blood appeared on the silver skin. "Then I will end this the old way. Your law, your tradition. I have the right." For a long moment, no one moved. The entire court held its breath. The emperor sat frozen on his throne, watching his son kneel before a human with a blade at his neck. Then shoulders slumped. "I yield," he whispered. The words were barely audible, but in the silence of the throne room everyone heard them. "I yield." Jack lowered his sword and stepped back. His legs felt like water. His vision was starting to blur. He had pushed his body far beyond its limits, and now it was demanding payment. But before he could fall, something happened that made everyone in the room freeze with shock. Ran to him. She ran across the sacred floor, her royal composure completely gone. Tears streamed down her silver face as she pushed past guards and nobles who were too stunned to stop her. She ran with the desperation of someone who had almost lost everything, and had just discovered that hope was still possible. She threw herself into Jack's arms. He caught her somehow, despite his wounds, despite his exhaustion. He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight as her whole body shook with sobs. She pressed her face against his shoulder, and he could feel her tears soaking through his torn clothes. Every alien in the throne room went silent. They stared at this impossible sight. A princess, a daughter of the eternal emperor, embracing a human in the most sacred space in the empire. Did not touch, did not cry, did not throw away their dignity for something as primitive as love. But did. And she did not care who saw. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, the emperor rose from his throne. He was old, ancient beyond counting, but in that moment his eyes were clear and sharp. He looked at his daughter weeping in the arms of a human, and something changed in his face. "Perhaps," he said, his voice carrying through the silence, "we have underestimated humanity." He turned to his guards. "Arrest Prince. He will answer for his crimes against the Empire and against our guest." Then he looked at Jack, still holding in his arms. "And someone please help Commander to the medical wing. It seems he has earned our hospitality." Jack did not hear the rest. The world was going dark around the edges and his legs finally gave out. But as he fell with him, refusing to let go of his hand. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was her voice, soft and fierce, and full of something that sounded like love. "I told you that you were foolish," she whispered, "but I am glad you did not listen." When Jack woke 3 days later, the galaxy had changed. Conspiracy had been exposed. The trade agreement had been signed, and at his bedside sat a silver princess who had broken every rule her civilization held dear, simply because she had found something worth breaking them for. She smiled at him when he opened his eyes. It was an awkward smile, unpracticed and uncertain. Did not smile. But for him, she was learning. And that, Jack thought, was worth everything.